So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about how ALM came to be at Rockwell Collins, a lot of the customizations that we did to meet Rockwell Collins' specific needs, and some of the lessons that we learned along the way. But first, let me tell you about Rockwell Collins. Arthur Collins was just a teenager growing up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which is where we are from, when he started building ham radios in his bedroom. At the ripe old age of 24 years old, he founded Collins Radio, building and selling shortwave radios out of his basement. That same year, Collins Radio captured the world's attention by establishing communications with the South Pole expedition. Several years later, Neil Armstrong used a Collins radio to broadcast from the moon. How cool is that? In fact, Rockwell Collins radios were used on all of the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs and the Skylab program, and Rockwell Collins equipment has been on most of the space programs, including the space shuttles and the Mars rover. Another cool fact about Rockwell Collins is that the first GPS receiver was designed and built by Rockwell Collins. And the first GPS signal was received by an engineer sitting on the roof one night using that L1 band antenna. The funny thing about that is that that team didn't realize what a historic event that would be. And so the engineer sitting on the roof, he drew the short straw. They had to put a phone up on the roof with him and have the wire going down through the window. It was, 1977, no cell phones, because his wife was 9 months pregnant. Today, we're an international organization with nearly 20,000 employees in 150 different countries. And our systems transmit nearly 70% of all of the United States and allied military airborne communications. And how many of you here flew to San Jose for the summit? Well, our avionics are on nearly every airplane in the world. If you flew here, Rockwell Collins helped keep you safe. To develop safety-critical systems and to have FAA certifications and certifications from other countries, our engineering teams have to follow process guidance from DO 178B and ARP 4754 and other acronyms with numbers in them. And what those represent, among other things, are unique requirements for tools to support configuration control and quality assurance and traceability. And just this example, I was going to explain traceability. So we start out with the customer requirements, and those flow down into the detailed systems, hardware, software requirements, then down into design and architecture, and then into implementation with the hardware, software, test procedures, test results. And all of those need to be traced from the requirements down into all of those so that we can provide a report on exactly where every requirement was satisfied and where it was verified. If the customer changes a requirement, which happens a lot, or if a defect is found or we need to do some sort of re-architecture to the system, all of the related artifacts need to be updated and reviewed, and also the tracing has to be updated and reviewed. That's a pretty heavy process. Can you imagine following that kind of process when developing your plugins? But when you're sitting on an airplane, aren't you glad to know that no requirements fell through the cracks? With the integrated environment of ALM, this process is made a lot more efficient. So the product lifecycle at Rockwell Collins starts with programs, with the program managers and contracts and marketing. And of course, all of our systems are built and supported by operations with customer service, the factory, and the repair centers. But my department is funded by engineering. We're part of a shared services model so that instead of each department having independent tools teams, we're actually funded by all of engineering to provide the tools for software and hardware engineers, resource and project managers, and the quality assurance and certification experts. ALM supports all of the engineering design and development, as well as those places that overlap with programs and operations. So To move engineering from client-side tools into an integrated web-based environment was going to take a lot of preparation. Change can be hard and disruptive, and engineers can be very passionate about their tools, believe me. And so we invested heavily in making sure that the transition to ALM for engineering teams would be as smooth as possible. We started out by determining what are the real needs? Well, they evolved over time. By working with engineers from across the organization of all disciplines, we were able to capture those needs and build the business case for ALM. For those of you who've worked for large companies, you probably realize how hard sometimes it is to build a business case like that. But it was obvious that engineers needed to be able to collaborate with engineering team members across the street and around the world. And we also needed to have data centered around the project teams, not around each of the individual tools. That way, it would better enable real-time reporting, quicker onboarding of team members, and more effective security. Also, we wanted to be able to have regular upgrades so that we could keep the tools current. And sometimes that's pretty difficult with client-side tools. So we started out on a year-long trade study back in 2011 to try and find a viable ALM solution. We started out with 35 strong candidates, and those were brought in-house then. Actually, we narrowed it down to 8 first. Brought them in-house and did a deeper evaluation of those in 30 different categories. Things like scalability, integration, security, performance. Extendability actually was a very key component. So the existence of REST APIs would be a big plus. Funny thing is, with Atlassian, we only considered Jira at first. What we didn't realize was that Jira, as a standalone product, was never intended to be a full ALM solution. It was only when we brought in Confluence that the ALM solution from Atlassian emerged as a clear leader. And so we started out by providing the ALM solution from Atlassian to the tools teams, straight out of the box, no customizations. But we also selected 4 engineering teams to provide pilot evaluations. Those teams found the tools, they liked them so much, they became so popular that other engineering teams requested to be onboarded sooner. And we saw an adoption rate with ALM that we've never seen with any other engineering tool before. Change management did not prepare us for that. When we designed ALM, we took the approach of managing a single central instance of the Atlassian tools, and we provide Jira, Confluence, Fisheye, Crucible, and Bamboo, and Crowd is used as single sign-on. We developed a toolbar that provided project-centric navigation between the tools. And to meet Rockwell Collins' specific needs, we deployed several plugins, some that we purchased, and many that we developed internally. All of our documentation is hosted in Confluence, including our ALM handbook, which is our user guide for engineering. And we created a quick start guide, which will provide an overview of all of the tools that are in ALM and what they provide. And rather than recreate the wheel, we also created overview pages that linked to the Atlassian documentation for all of the out-of-the-box functionality that was provided. And for each of our internally developed plugins and our workflows, we developed user guides that we also included in the handbook. We knew that onboarding and training was going to be critical to the success for engineering teams on ALM, so we invested heavily in that area. And we made it very easy to find how to request help or to request a new project by putting it right in the toolbar under a support menu. When a new project was requested, we would schedule a consultation meeting with all of the project leads so that we could interview them and find out what their exact needs were for the tools, for the workflows, and for the project permissions. And before we would even set up the project, we would schedule instructor-led training, and we made that mandatory for all managers, engineers, and admins. It certainly takes more time to customize the projects for their unique needs and to require instructor-led training in advance. But we found that it's proven invaluable for engineering to have a successful migration onto ALM, and, bonus, it saves our support team from a lot of basic use questions. Our infrastructure experts were heavily involved in preparing ALM for engineering, along with providing all of the system administration activities. They also host the tools on top-tier Linux virtual machines. And they set up automated monitoring and alerts. They use analytics to keep ahead of the engineering demand. For example, they measure the response times for all of the major tools, and experience has taught them now that they start getting complaints when the response rates get over certain levels. Also, all of our service notices for outages, deployments, and maintenance are announced right in that ALM toolbar, so it's visible to all users. For the workflows, we set up our tools teams with the standard out-of-the-box workflows with no customizations for epics, stories, new features, bugs, etc. But for our engineering teams, we scheduled workshops, and we invited engineers from all over the company of all disciplines to participate, representing different organizations. They defined the design and development workflows, and they include work packages, which would be the top-level container and description of the scope to be performed. Work elements would be used to track the work on each of those individual artifacts and documents that I showed in that traceability slide. They use tasks for the verification activities and snags to report test failures. Also, we developed approval issue types, which are used for all of the certification and quality assurance type activities. And we also developed Rockwell Collins specific Agile issue types to meet Rockwell Collins specific needs for Agile teams. All of these together act as the building blocks, the Legos essentially, that an engineering team can use to put together to define their process for work from start to completion, whether it's a very simple, small project or a very complicated avionics system. We also developed workflows for project management, including risk and opportunity management, and customer collaboration with action items and cord memos. We do sometimes get requests for changes to the issue types of the workflows, such as the users want a new enterprise field, or they want to change the name of something. And we handle all of those requests through an engineering change control board made up of engineers across the company, including several of the original workshop participants. We also sometimes get requests for a new issue type and workflow, and some of those are because there's a process that we haven't yet covered. For example, that's how cord memos came to be. And right now we're working on something called the External Incident Report, which would be another form of customer collaboration into the design and development activities. Sometimes we also get requests for a new issue type and a new workflow for a team that considers their design and development process unique enough that it requires that. We've been successful by putting those teams in contact with other teams that are already using those workflows as they were originally designed. That kind of collaboration and education usually does the trick. Also, our engineering executive leadership is very supportive of having common development workflows, because then we can take advantage of real-time reporting and common quality assurance metrics and common training. However, we do recognize that project teams have unique needs, and so we have developed several plugins to address some of those needs. I'll discuss those more in a bit. So, the tools. As I mentioned before, we did deploy several plugins to meet Rockwell Collins specific needs, and many of those we developed internally. In fact, using agile processes, we've developed and deployed over 30 plugins over the last 3 years. All of the plugins that we develop, or the ones that we bring in-house, that we purchase, we have to do a deep evaluation, or as much as possible anyways, for scalability and performance. We found that just a simple JQL query, if used improperly, can really impact the performance of the system. And so we have to watch very carefully for that. The plugins that we've developed have been to satisfy things like process requirements for design assurance export compliance and certification processes. For example, we developed an approval tool that's used by the quality teams and the certification experts for all of their formal review activities. It's used in combination with Crucible informal reviews to pull in all of the information they need about the reviews to make that informed decision. We also developed, for export compliance requirements, an ALM message center. All of the ALM notifications are then routed to the message center instead of to email. We developed several plugins for automation of common repeatable activities and to do calculations and automated reports. And as I mentioned before, we developed several plugins for project configuration options for fields and processes and templates. And several plugins were developed for project management activities, such as the issue links visualization plugin. This puts a tab right on every JIRA issue that shows all of the dependencies that are linked to that issue. The user has the option to select how deep the links should go and what link types to show. And for those teams that are using due dates, they also have the option to view it on a timeline. One of my favorite plugins is our Auto Issue Create plugin. This one allows a project to define all of those Legos and that put together what that process looks like from start to finish. And then, when the project manager approves the scope at the top-level work package during their change control board meeting, they can select to auto-create those issues from the menu, and it'll automatically generate all of those issues. It'll link them as defined by that configuration, and it'll pre-populate them with data from the top-level work package, as well as anything that was in the configuration itself, like assignees or acceptance criteria or things like that. I'm sure you can understand how this would save our engineering teams a lot of time. I learned last week, actually, that one of the teams had defined the beginning of their new program with 200 work packages, and this would be the scope of the entire program. So they had a really long CCB and approved all of those and ran Auto Issue Create using a script, and it just generated 1,500 JIRA issues with all of the data they needed, all of the completion criteria and assignees, and all of it linked properly. Nothing falls through the cracks. I was pretty happy to hear about that one. We also developed a build mapping tool. We call it the Fix Version gadget. And this pulls in all of the data from a filter, all of the issues through a filter, and plots them according to the fixed version they're assigned to. And it could be a single project or it can be multiple JIRA projects. The users have the option to zoom and to print, and also the y-axis is configurable so they can show the number of issues or they can show the original estimate in hours or story points. Also, it has a nice feature of status, select, deselect. So you can focus in on the things you really care about, such as the work that hasn't yet been closed. A similar gadget was created for status reporting. This has all those same nice features for filter, zoom, print, status, select, deselect. But it also allows the teams to input predictive data. So that way they can compare their actual progress against the program plan, which that aids in earned value analysis. Both of these gadgets have hover over status, so you can see all the details, the numbers of issues, and they also have optional formats for line charts or area charts. But the really nice thing about the bar charts is that it has click-through to search. So if, as a project manager, I might be reviewing this and saying, why are these 50 issues not being worked yet? I can click on that bar, and it'll pull up a JQL query with those 50 issues, so I can do a deeper analysis. We developed several similar plugins for quality assurance measures, for them to be able to do analysis on defects, where they came from, and how they're impacting the program plans. All of those defect charts and other quality assurance measures are based on the standard enterprise workflows for work packages and work elements. So that way, that's where some of that common reporting comes from. Along with analyzing the defect information in the JIRA issues themselves, It also looks at the JIRA issue history to see which ones have been closed and then which ones were reopened, because those are flagged as defect rework also. And the last plugin I was going to describe is our Risk and Opportunity Management plugin. This calculates the cost and schedule impacts according to a project impact model, a project configurable impact model. For those of you who aren't familiar with risk management, this is important because it makes it so the plugin can be used by projects, whatever their schedule is or the budget. For example, a $1 million project might consider a $250,000 risk a major risk, whereas a $10 million project would consider a $250,000 risk a minor risk. In my households, it's catastrophic, but the Risk and Opportunity Management gadget displays all of those risks and opportunities according to that project configurable model, and then it also provides the click-through to the JIRA issues themselves so they can do deeper evaluation that way too. So all the tools in the world can't provide the support that our engineering teams need in order to gain all the benefits that ALM can bring to them. We can create all kinds of great functionality, but if they don't know about it or they don't know how to use it, it's a waste. And so we have a full-time support team, and they are co-located with our developers and our system administration. And they also work directly with engineering project assistants, so they can help set up the Confluence pages for executive reporting or the dashboards for the engineering teams. They can also help them understand how to use filters and Agile boards most appropriately for their processes. Also, we made it very easy to request help in the support menu. And what that does is it pulls up a dialogue so they can ask questions or report issues or bugs, or they can request new features. And all of the changes that are requested then go through our backlog grooming process and are prioritized with our engineering leadership, who pays the bills, and with that change control board. All of the deployments are done on a rapid 3-week sprint cycle, and we also have all of our versions accompanied by a version number. A major version represents when we upgrade our Atlassian tools, and a minor version is when we upgrade one of the plugins or the workflows. Also, we found that it's really important to engineering for them to understand exactly what's in each of those deployments. So we create release notes and broadcast those by email, and they also include links to all of the ALM handbook updates. Last summer, we upgraded to ALM 3.0. That represented when we upgraded to JIRA 7. We also have a Rockwell Collins specific Atlassian user group. Rockwell Collins doesn't call it an Atlassian user group. They call it a community of practice. Rockwell Collins has communities of practice for several things like project management, model-based development, hardware engineering, a couple dozen others. We set up a community of practice for ALM. And we meet monthly with Rockwell Collins engineers to discuss topics that the users request and that they present on. Recent topics have been on the quality assurance measures and on the risk and opportunity management gadget. They also take time to share tips and tricks and their best practices for how they use the tools in their organization. But one of the most important things we can do for our customers is communicate with them. So, as I mentioned before, we provide lots of ways to do announcements in the ALM toolbar, in our release notes. Google Plus communities are used, and lots of other things, emails. We also solicit feedback through the support forums and through training and also through surveys that we send out. But I find that the most valuable communication we have is the two-way communication when we have our change control board meetings or our design workshops, or we invite them to sprint demonstration meetings. Also, all of the collaboration that happens right in JIRA and Confluence itself. And of course, all the emails and instant messages that my team gets every day also. You know, I find that I have more visibility and understanding of what engineering needs and priorities are now than I did when I was actually in engineering. So it might have been easier for Rockwell Collins to stay in the client-side legacy tools. But the benefits that our engineering teams are seeing with ALM, with collaborative design and development, have been overwhelming. Just a year after the first teams were being onboarded into ALM, they were being nominated and they were winning Lean Achievement Awards. They were reporting up to 30% reductions in costs in some of their processes. And, more importantly, in avionics, a 25% reduction in defects. Those are pretty big deal. Can you imagine those kinds of results in your organization? However, getting to where we are today had a lot of challenges, and most of those had to do with scale. Just by the numbers, we have over 7,000 active users, and that's not the number of licenses, that's the number of people that are in the tools all the time. We have 900 JIRA projects, 2,600 Confluence spaces, nearly 500,000 JIRA issues, and 1.5 million pages. But the scale of ALM is large not just because of the numbers, but because of the complexity of the workflows and the processes that they represent, and also because of the number of plugins that we've built to support them. As you might have guessed, our commitment to upgrade JIRA and Confluence regularly is a pretty big deal. Just last summer, when we upgraded to JIRA 7, it took us 4 sprints of preparation to prepare all of those plugins for that upgrade. So what's next? We're expecting the active user count to grow to over 10,000 users. Our previously most used engineering tool had around 6,000 users. But we're not surprised to see that the numbers of users are growing to almost double with ALM, because we're seeing it pull in engineering management and engineers and assistants and operations for collaborative discussions, and those ultimately improve our processes and our products. Also, we're being challenged to bring in change drivers and the knowledge and process right into the tools, so we can have integrated workflows. That's expected that it'll reduce the ambiguity and variability in our program plans and execution. And also, we do want to provide mobile access to engineers while still protecting engineering data. This may not seem like a difficult challenge in a world where everybody has a smartphone or a tablet, but for companies like Rockwell Collins, this isn't always an option, certainly not an easy option. We have government systems customers, and so our systems are subject to data protection regulations like the Federal Information Security Management Act, FISMA, or DFARS, or ITAR, or a lot more acronyms like that. But when we're able to address those acronyms, and we will, Rockwell Collins will be able to benefit from all of the productivity and freedom that mobility brings to engineering. So what are some of the things we've learned along the way? Oops, I'm skipping something. These are all intended to support our roadmap, which is to provide an integrated product development from start to finish, and to have powerful collaboration with our aircraft manufacturing and government agency customers, and to have a fully engaged international workforce. And with ALM, we're well on our way to achieving these goals. So now, what are some of the lessons we've learned along the way? The Boy Scouts had it right. Be prepared. We've been reminded of this numerous times. On the large scale, to prepare for infrastructure, documentation, training, onboarding, support, and development. But also by being really prepared on the smaller scale, by truly understanding our end user needs and their use cases, so that we can make good design decisions and priority calls. And I guess the second most important thing that we've learned is that we need to design the workflows for different processes, not for different teams. A company like ours can have hundreds or even thousands of different opinions on how many states there should be, and what should they be named, and what are the fields, and are they required or not, and all of the other different configuration options. But by getting engineers into a room so that they can have those discussions and those debates and make those compromises together, they become the owners of those workflows. And only then can the company as a whole truly benefit from the reporting, quality, and training benefits. And the most important lesson I can share is that communication with your end user is a must. They need to know about all the great functionality that you're providing to them. And you need to be able to listen to them so that you can truly understand their needs and their priorities. Communicating with thousands of end users is probably the most challenging part of what we do. We can't twist their arms and make them read the release notes and the emails and the ALM handbook. I wish we could. We can't have one-on-one conversations with all of them, and we can't invite all of them to our sprint demos. We certainly can't force them all to attend the community of practice meetings. But we can, and we will, continue to reach out to them in as many different ways as we can, because we know it's that important. When our teams are experiencing results like this, how can we do anything less? Thank you very much for attending and for your attention.
Great, thank you so much. Let's see, it looks like we have a few questions that people wanted to ask right off the bat. I think a lot of people saw the amount of customization you had, and I think looking around the room, I saw some admin faces kind of saying, uh-oh, this seems like a lot of work. So the top question was, how much trouble do you have upgrading Jira with all the customizations that you have?
Well, as I mentioned, we did prepare for that with four sprints last May, actually April, May, and we deployed it in June. So that was 12 weeks. Is that right? Yeah, 12 weeks. And so we have to do, of course, all of the testing. We also evaluate, is some of this obsolete now because of the upgrades that we're seeing, new functionality. And then, of course, all the updates we have to make. We also work with one of the experts. And so it's a lot of work, it is. But we have to meet certain requirements for Rockwell Collins needs. And when certain products are available, and we can analyze whether or not we want to continue to maintain those plugins. But yeah, it's a lot of work.
Maybe building off that, how often do you target big upgrades to Jira and the rest of the suite for you?
Well, we're trying to do at least one major upgrade for all of the different Atlassian products per year. Sometimes more. Certainly any security upgrades we do right away. But yeah, last year was Jira 7, and we, of course, upgraded all of the others at the same time. This year we've decided we're going to take a model of upgrading Fisheye Crucible at one time, and then we're going to do Bamboo, and then we'll probably do Confluence and Jira at the same time when we do Confluence 6. But that'll probably be in the spring.
Now, we do have a microphone roaming around the room, so feel free to raise your hand if you have a question that you'd like to answer, and our room monitor here will come over and give you the microphone. Looks like there's one in the back over here. So while you're moving over there, we did have another question, which was, how complex is the journey to create your own tools? Did you work together with Atlassian or just with the standard documentation?
Well, the trade study did take a full year. And I wasn't involved in that directly, so I probably would say whoever asked that question, please see us afterwards. I have two experts here, the former architect who's now our group manager, and the current architect who's one of our software developers, and they were involved in that trade study. They can probably describe that better than I can.
Great. And are we ready with this question? Oh, right here. Go ahead.
Like you mentioned, it was a lot of work, so I'm just curious, did you actually end up saving money vis-a-vis using one of the other 8 PLM solutions or ALM solutions that you had evaluated, and how?
We believe so. Yes. Actually, our organization is funded by engineering overhead. So our department was actually funded higher in the last 2 years than it normally would have, but the savings that engineering teams are experiencing has more than covered it.
While there's another hand coming up over here, there was a question about if you made any use of certified Atlassian partners to develop or maintain plugins for you. Did you do it all in-house, or did you have any external resources?
Am I allowed to name names?
Of partners?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Adaptivist.
Wait, are they a competitor?
Adaptivist supported a lot of our work. They actually worked with us on the approval tool, the issue links visualization, and the ALM message center, among a few other things.
Cool. And we've got Adaptivists sitting in the front row if you want to bug
And
them
back there.
afterwards. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I have a real quick one. How large is the ALM team? Okay. Other
Yeah.
people wanted to know.
That was my pre-prepared question in case nobody asked. We actually have, considering how many users we have, it's pretty small. We have about 15 team members. Half of them are dedicated to testing and development, and the other half are on infrastructure and support type activities.
Great. And then I think there's a question up here if the... Oh, go ahead. Yeah, over here. And then if you want to come over here.
My question is around the difference between, now you guys looking at application lifecycle management versus product management. What was, how did you guys adjust it? Do you guys have a separate completely product managers?
Do you mean like program managers, the
Yeah,
business?
you guys have program managers that kind of act like product managers, or how is that broken up?
Well, we have program managers that handle the business side of selling airplane avionics or working with government systems customers directly for developing those contracts and defining the marketing and the contracts and the scope. But then we have project managers who work with the engineering teams to actually satisfy the design and development. So the project managers have been heavily involved in ALM.
But you don't have product managers.
We have product line and program managers. They're essentially our lifecycle value stream managers, and they work with our end-to-end customers, aircrafts and manufacturers and stuff.
Okay, so who were the product owners that were actually prioritizing the Scrum and? Okay.
I work with engineering constantly. I'm essentially the ALM TPM, technical project manager, but I'm also playing the role of the product owner, and I work directly with all of engineering to try and. That's why engineering sort of threw me over the wall to go work with the ALM team because. So, yeah.
Okay.
Did I say that nicely?
And then we're going to have a few more questions, it looks like, from the audience. Great. Go ahead, Dan.
So I think all of us have run tools before, and our users of the tools can be quite demanding in their requests. So how have you managed to deal with so many different users who want to use the tools in so many different ways? Do you just tell them how it has to be, or do you have some way of working with them?
Well, so we work directly with our engineering leadership, their engineering leadership. I mean, for commercial systems and government systems, they have their vice presidents have been very involved in prioritizing our activities. And then we have workshops with engineers from different organizations to help us design the different plugins. And there's always going to be compromises that have to be made because you can't satisfy all 8,000 users with everything. But overall, it's been an extremely popular tool, so I think we've been doing pretty well so far.
Great. And then back here.
Hi, great talk. I noticed you had a lot of projects, and I was just wondering, quick question, do you have your projects as deliverable-based, or are your projects teams?
I would say it's probably a mix, definitely a mix. Most of them, I believe, are team-based, but some of them are set up for a program, a specific program. But I would say the majority of them are team-based.
Excellent. And I think we can do one more question. Where's the mic floating around? I can't see it. Oh, you got it. Okay. But over here, this will be our last question. Then if you have any more questions for Bonnie, feel free to talk to her afterwards.
Or these two.
Or these two.
Well, what you did is very impressive.
Thank you.
And I immediately wanted some of those tools. And I'm wondering, rather than everybody having to reinvent the wheel, most of the things you made would be useful to almost any organization. Are you working with Atlassian or Adaptivist to share some of those things?
So actually, we anticipated that kind of question. So we did ask at our IP experts at work, and we're not going to ever be authorized to sell them directly to customers, but we might be authorized to license with one of the other partners or experts
So you'd consider maybe going through a partner to sell them?
to license them. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I hope you do.
Yes, could be a lucrative side business, Bonnie. Well, thank you. Please give a round of applause. Thank you, Bonnie, for being here with us.